Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. I'm your host, Dr. David Oualaalou. Very, very excited to be with you. I have an interesting topic. I will be talking about the recent report coming out of the South Korean intelligence service, suggesting that there is a hint into the Americans wanting to meet with the North Koreans. In other words, another summit for Trump with Kim. So I am going to be providing you my own analysis, given the facts that there were two other moving events that happened pertaining to North Korea. And this is what I'm going to be sharing with you in this live stream here. So before I do this, let me quickly say hi to our wonderful community. As always, Lian, good to see you. Willie Holman, as always. Truth Seeker, oh, you wrote good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you and our inquisitive community. Saw your interview in Diplomatic Dispatch. Very interesting. Indeed, that was with Dr. Yasser Masood. He just launched his channel. So I'm going to provide you guys the link. Please make sure to go check it out. Subscribe to that channel. Usually I don't do interviews much, but I'm very selective as to which channel I will show up at. But when Dr. Masood decided to launch his channel, I agreed to do the interview with him. So go check it out, and please subscribe to his channel as well. Alice Talukin, as always. Taiwan Still, Rampel So One, good to see you. Passive Income, good to see you, and good afternoon or morning, whatever part of the world you're in. So anyway, what I'm going to be doing in this live stream here, I'm going to do my analysis. I'll do geography and history of North Korea. You need to understand about the Korean Peninsula. I know some of you might know, but again, it's for everybody to learn. So then I'm going to be sharing with you some clips of the assassination of Kim Jong-un, so the half brother of the current leader. So then I'll conclude with my part of my second part of my analysis about this particular topic. So some just housekeeping items beside the Dr. Masood's channel, which I shared with you. I am working currently on two main topics, one from Latin America and one from West Asia or the Middle East. So once again, I'm waiting to ensure the accuracy of certain information, and once that became sort of confirmed, then I'll launch the live stream for you tomorrow or the day after, if I could. So, all right, I have one headline to share with you because I need you to know what's going on with TikTok. You know, of course, I was arguing China don't sell. There is now Donald Trump. So why did Donald Trump, or the US for that matter, and mostly Donald Trump, insisted on neutralizing? I will use the term neutralize. And you know, for us to those who've been in the military, you know what the term means. When we say we neutralize the enemy, you know what it means. So when Donald Trump decided to neutralize the TikTok platform locally, because he wanted to separate it from its parent company, ByteDance. So here is the thing. The US succeeded in controlling now the Chinese TikTok app within its borders, not over, it's within here. After a long sort of effort to limit the influence of TikTok. Of course, their argument is the competition with the American social media apps like Facebook and Instagram. No. It's because TikTok, you were able to see the truth in TikTok. Clips that you will hear about, you won't see them on Facebook, you won't see them on Instagram. You know, Instagram and Facebook, there's the back door of the US government. Simple as that. And I don't shy away from saying it. So, because think about it. For Facebook now, if you want to go and wanted to close your account, you can't. So I have a Facebook account. I don't even get on it. I left it for whatever. So, and this is why. It's because Donald Trump wanted to shape the narrative, because TikTok was outperforming the American apps. So, and this is especially among the youth. Well, guess what? If the youth are informed about the truth, the outcome will be different. It's like what we are seeing right now in the US, because there is a massive division that exists in America. Maybe one day I'll do a topic about. Usually I don't get involved in this kind of talks about the, because it's very very venomous. American politics and the domestic issues, the division, the decline of religion and whatever else, all this. Suffice it to say, for this issue of the TikTok, suffice it to say that Donald Trump signed an executive order. This is the issue. He signed an executive order transferring this ownership now of the popular app TikTok that is within the US to American ownership. You're looking at, I even found out that Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox, and you know how the narrative is on Fox. I don't watch TV, as I call it, the idiot box. It just doesn't make any sense to watch the idiot box for the hypes they are propagating. So CNN and Fox and MSNBC, all those is nothing. Now, Murdoch was thinking about having the ownership of TikTok as well. There's also some other individuals like Oracle. Well, you know who owns Allison. Allison is a Jewish American, by the way. He is a great supporter of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. We knew about Allison. As a matter of fact, the billionaire, how did he reach his wealth, whatever, is through certain mechanisms by supporting. So he is to his benefit. If he takes over TikTok, that means you won't be able to see much what's going on with Israel on TikTok. That is the point. So, and that is now they've reached about 80%. So, however, the remaining 20% is going to stay with the parent company, ByteDance, because this way, this is less than the level, in my opinion, that will allow the Chinese company now to maintain control and comply with the US laws. This is where, I wasn't in favor of selling TikTok, but again, who am I to say this? It's just an opinion, no more, no less. But anyway, all right, let's get into our really the key topic. I am here today, and I'm going to highlight to you as to what the South Korean intelligence services have been disclosing. So I did this thumbnail here, and I put this title here. Really, what do you want to talk about? And this is not Donald Trump asking, it's Kim asking, because Kim holds the cards, not Trump. What you're going to be talking about. And that's just, to me, common sense. So here's what happened, just for you to know. The intelligence services in South Korea hinted at the possibility for a meeting between Pyongyang and Washington. I will even go as far as saying, knowing how these things work, I won't be surprised that we might have fed the information to the South Korean intelligence service. Yeah, that's how much we do. That's how, if we are able to, for example, listen to Angela Merkel's cell phone, we are able to tap into the French intelligence services, whatever, except the Brits. The Brits and the Americans work together on this. What makes us that? And this is why when the 20 double agents in China were neutralized, the CIA was left with no eyes and ears in China's territory because they disappeared. So that's why I'm not surprised at this. I will even go as far as saying maybe we have fed the information. Suffice it to say that this particular possibility of the meeting comes on the heel of, or against the backdrop of Kim Jong-un. What is he doing? He is ordering the use of all resources to bolster North Korea's nuclear program. Basically, what he used the term is to sharpen the nuclear shield and sword, in quote. That is now become clear as to why the US will want to meet with North Korea. Actually, we will want to, not North Koreans don't care about meeting with the Americans. They don't care. North Korea, especially after the past few weeks, you remember when Kim Jong-un was invited the guests to in China. You all remember that picture of the Actually, I kept the picture here. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Let me see. Oh, I did. You guys are lucky. Look at this picture right there. That tells you the story right there. So could this be also because we are concerned where things are headed? Possibilities. So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered now the use of all resources, as I mentioned, to sort of increase the resources to bolster the nuclear program. And in his argument, this is about protecting the country's sovereignty and a national security. Yeah. And this is why the South Korean came up with this hint that of the possibility of a meeting between North Korea and the US. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the North Korean nuclear program, the Research Institute, this is where senior officials and scientists at this particular research institute said that the country's top priority now is to continue developing its nuclear response posture, in quote. Here is what the statement said, and I quote this because this is directly from the Korean Central News Agency. So it says, Comrade Jong-un said, we must constantly sharpen and renew the nuclear shield and sword to reliably safeguard national sovereignty, security, interests, and the right to development, end of quote. The message is right there. It's very, very, very sort of clear as to what it is. And this is, of course, you all know, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. I have a picture of him. My apologies if I mispronounced the name right here. This is the South Korean president. He's the one who said that, well, North Korea has pursued a nuclear weapon program for decades. Well, this is not new. So for him to even state this, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, including a secret uranium enrichment process. Yeah, because that's what allowed it to acquire at that time. And I was aware of it back, if we go back 2003, 2004. Back then, the idea of developing 20 nuclear weapons per year. So, and this leads me to talk about what has been said on the global stage as to how many nuclear warheads or nuclear bomb North Korea has. And I'm going to ask you that question. In your opinion, if you happen to know, can you just share in the chat box what is the number of the nuclear bombs, in your opinion, North Korea has in its possession? So let me just see if you happen to know. So we just sharing information here, no more, no less. Let me see what you guys are writing, because they've been working on it for quite a while. And there is, by the way, there is no Jan. I'm sorry, Zoyan. You're saying 200. To my knowledge, it's too much. No. Pierce, 600. That's too much. That's too much. Cambridge, you are closer to at least, to my knowledge, once again. So, of course, Truth Seeker, thousands. No, not yet. As a matter of fact, no, that will be China is gonna cross the 1,000 mark by 2030. That's to my knowledge. So, so far, what the assessments from intelligence services around the world saying that about North Korea possesses about 50 nuclear warheads. That, again, that's my opinion. So here is where that difference is. The 50 nuclear warheads with enough fissile material for potentially 90 warheads. That means, to my knowledge, was over 111 nuclear warheads. That's to my knowledge. And again, that's just my opinion. It could same arguments can be made about the Israelis. Israelis never disclosed the number, which the Israelis will have over 122, to my knowledge. I mean, it might even go to 140 or so. So there's no official numbers for that. That's what I want you to get. And this is where, when you think about North Korea's program, nuclear program, the capacity to produce 6 to 7 warheads annually. So, and this is These estimates of the 50 nuclear warheads came out from the Federation of American Scientists. Well, first of all, yes, it might be an estimate, but we are not on the ground to know. You won't even be able to know. Same arguments can be made about Pakistan. Pakistan has over what, 400 plus? We don't know the exact number. So there is one article, a great article from the Armed Controls, and I'm going to share it with you. Usually I read their analysis and all that stuff because I disclose some of their reporting in my Russia book. So I put the link for you in the chat box later on for you to read. The idea that North Korea conducted 6 nuclear tests between 2006 and 2017, with the last one in 2017. And there's the difference about the 2017. It was suspected to be a hydrogen bomb, which, by the way, Israelis have. So this is, again, I just want you to have an idea as to when you start to think about what is the possibility of the Americans wanting to have a summit with North Korea to convince them about dropping the nukes. They won't. I'm telling you this. I'll bet whatever on it. They will not, no matter what the US gives them. I don't care what the US gives them. Literally, they will not give up the nuclear program. It's because that's their survival. That's what they're gonna. I mean, think about it. Can the US threaten North Korea? No. And this is, again, it goes back to the Iran issue. That's why Iran is kind of has blind spots somewhere. I don't know what it is, but that's, again, it's just for me to. So let's talk about geography, and I'll do a little bit of history for you to know exactly what is going on or what has been going on with North Korea's history. Then we'll continue our analysis about this. So let me share a screen with you, and I'll give credit to World Atlas as always, because that's usually the maps that I use. So North Korea. So it is in Eastern Asia. That's where it's located. And of course, it is on both sides of both the northern and the eastern hemispheres of the earth. North Korea occupies the northern half of the Korean Peninsula, which that one borders, by the way, the Korean Bay and the Sea of Japan, as you see on the map there, between China and South Korea. North Korea is bordered by China to the north, by Russia to the northeast, by South Korea in the south, and you have the military demarcation line, which forms the land border between the North and the South Korean. So it's known as the 38th parallel. I show it right there, the 38th parallel, or it's known as DMZ, the demilitarized zone. That is so. This is one of the things about North Korea that I want you to understand geographically where it is, because it will make more sense to you to understand these aspects of it. So where is the, let me go back up here. Now, the history aspects of it. So when you think about the history of North Korea, very, very interesting aspects of it. Now, one thing a lot of people do not know, that the people's existence in North Korea, they have been living in the Korean Peninsula, not North Korea, I'm sorry, the Korean Peninsula, because that was known in history, in historical record, as an ancient Korea. And that goes back all the way to 668 AD. That's how far it goes back. So the people will live in the Korean Peninsula, and that one since prehistoric times. And of course, slowly developing their own distinct culture and civilization. That's how they move throughout. So the Korean Peninsula, the Korean people, because at that time it was no north or south. So we're first united by none other than Silla dynasty. That's back in 668 AD. And since that time, moving forward, Korea has had to contend with the expansionist ambitions of its neighbors. What am I referring to? Which country I'm referring to here, in your opinion? Because it was one country that colonized the Korean Peninsula at that time. Let me see in the chat. To those who know a little bit of history about North Korea, which country in a neighborhood Oh, Taiwan still. You got it. You got it. It was Japan. Rampal Sawan. You got it. It was Japan. And this is where Japan comes in. And I'm just sort of summarizing the history here. You're looking at 1910. That's when Japan colonized the Korea. So in 1910, the Chosun dynasty ended with Japan's annexation and colonization of Korea. Because remember, once again, back then there was no North or South. So Koreans remember the Japanese colonial rule as a brutal experience. It's no difference that's what China experienced, especially with the Nanjing massacre between 1929 all the way to World War II. Of course, I'm talking about the length of the period, 14 years, especially from 34 all the way. But there was one specific time frame where vis-a-vis Nanjing, where the massacre and the brutal treatments of the Chinese took place. Well, it's no different than what they did prior to that in Korea. So resistance groups in Korea sort of formed. And it was not just in Korea, it was also in China. That's what was interesting. So, and mostly those groups were adopting the leftist politics at the time. And this was in reaction to the right-wing Japanese administration. And of course, to those who know a little bit of history, you read about it, there are memories out there. There's historical record for the Japanese imperialism administration oppression that took place, which continued to hunt those kind of relations between the people of both Koreas and Japan today. It's no different than the people of China, especially in Nanjing and Japan. People in Nanjing will never forget. So all Chinese society will never forget. Will they forgive? I don't know. But again, I had a chance to go inside that museum, and I saw the pictures, I saw the images. One picture that haunted me. It was this elderly lady, Chinese woman, literally in her late, I would say, mid 70s, late 70s, and when you see an elderly like that crying, and I think they killed her family member in front of her. So it was just that picture. I don't know what they did after that. Most likely the Japanese killed her too, but it haunted me, that picture, just seeing that. It was very, it's just sad to see. So I'm sure the Japanese did the same in Korea. So, and this is again, once Korea started to modernize during, at the time, moving forward with the city of Pyongyang in particularly, that's when Pyongyang became a vibrant center at that time for Western culture, believe it or not, including religion, and that was Christianity. This is why now it's forbidden when you go to North Korea, you can't take a Bible with you. You know, what happened to Otto, the guy from Maryland, the US guy who went to North Korea? Well, yeah, you might go through an organized trip if they allow you. Most likely Americans cannot just go. And second, why the heck are you taking a Bible for? They said you don't bring a Bible and you do it. So, and he ended up in jail. So, and this is what happened. One specific article that took place between 1910 and 1945. Japan worked, here is what Japan worked on, to wipe out the entire Korean culture, language, and history. So there is a great article out there, and I'm going to share a link with you it was written by Aaron Blackmore. Very interesting link. If you ever wanted to read a little bit more, I put it for you in the chat box. So and what this article show, what Aaron disclosed, and I have some pictures, and I give credit to Aaron for those images, because those are part of, let me do something here quickly. Here we go. I have some pictures right there. For example, when you see, not this one, I have one particular one. Right there, those are Japanese soldiers. So when you look at the article, you'll see this is during the 2018 Olympic Winter Games. South Koreans demanded an apology at that time, from an NBC commentator, as Aaron disclosed. So when you look at in 1910, when the Korea was annexed by the Empire of Japan after years of war, intimidation, and political machinations. So, and this one, the country, meaning Korea at that time, would be considered part of Japan until 1945. That's how long it took for this. So if you get a chance to read this, you're going to see a picture right there of Japanese soldiers. That's just for you to see that one. And once again, I give credit to this picture to Topical Press Agency. That's their picture. So those are Japanese officers in Korea. So they did the same as they did in Nanjing, the atrocities. So the Korea's people weren't the only thing that was plundered during Japan's colonization. You're talking about their culture, meaning Koreans' culture. Symbols were also considered fair game too, another word for destruction. So and one of the most sort of famous or powerful symbols of the Korean sovereignty and independence was its royal palace, so which was built in Seoul in 1395. That's how far back. By at that time, the Joseon dynasty. It was an old dynasty. I have to read up more on this dynasty. I know a little bit about it. I need to read up more on it. So, and soon after assuming power, the Japanese colonial government tore it down, over a third of the complex historic buildings. So, and the remaining structures were turned into tourist attraction for Japanese visitors. I have one picture here. I'm going to share it with you. This is the shrine, just for you to know. This is the shrine of 1,000 steps, the Shinto shrine, which was built in 1925 from forced, this is the key word, from forced Korean donations. Still remain, but is used as a city park. And I give credit of this picture to Batman Archives. That's their picture. That's their picture there. So they forced Korean to donate money to build this. So what the Japanese did back then was very, very horrific. And they did both in Korea and in China. And now that I saw that one in Nanjing city, it's I can only imagine how it was back then. So, and that in itself paved the way for, and I'm going to move on into my conversation here. So in August 1945, so in 1945, you had two U.S. officers, military officers. Those are the ones that draw up the line demarking the U.S. and the Soviet occupation zones at the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel, just for the community to know, wasn't drawn by the Koreans. It was the Americans who did that. The same problem the British did regarding the border between India and China. That's why they are demarked. And India thinking, when you think about Ladakh and so forth. So, and this is why I believe India will never want to sit down honestly with the Chinese and resolve the border issue. Just India won't want it, even though they won't use it anyway. They can't. India doesn't have the resources to develop that. China does. But even with that, they won't be willing to sit down with the Chinese and negotiate regarding the border to solve it once for all. The same arguments I can make. What the British, the chaos that they created, not only in that part of the world, but also in West Asia or Middle East, the U.S. officers were the one who demarked the line, demarking the line between the U.S. and the Soviet zones at that time at the 38th parallel. And the divide back then should have been temporary, right? That's what you will assume. Now, not the case. And this is a mere footnote in the Korean long history, because we don't want to be perceived as the one who created the issue to begin with. However, with the emergence of the Cold War, because that made that event very significant later on. That's why you are seeing over 30,000 US troops in South Korea. That is the reason why it became an issue, especially after with the rise of the Cold War. So, and seeking to ensure some sort of stability or maintaining this kind of respective influences in the Korea, both the United States and the Soviet Union at that time installed leaders sympathetic to their own cause. The US pushed for a South Korean leader that can serve our interest. The Soviet Union pushed for a leader in North Korea that can serve their own interest. Because why? Mistrust between both sides prevented cooperation. That is exactly what happened. And that in itself paved the way when the United States handed control over the southern half of the peninsula to Syngman Rhee. That was at the time. While the Soviet Union gave Kim Il-sung. That's where it all started with the Kim dynasty. Kim Il-sung power over the north. And that's why in 1948, to be exact, both sides claimed to be the legitimate governments and representative of the entire Korean peninsula. So then this paved the way for the beginning of the North Korea's history, which began right after World War II when the peninsula was divided, of course, at the 38th parallel. So, and like I mentioned earlier, both the Soviet Union at that time and the US pushed for their respective influence in the area. So it was one particular event that took place, which with the ascendancy of Kim Il-sung to the helm of powers, he led north into the south in 1950, sparking the Korean War. That's what triggers that. Of course, the US was also there. They were concerned that if the North Korea overtake the South. And that in itself, that Korean War ended in 1953 with the ceasefire. So technically, the war never ended. That is why you are still hearing about the hostilities, or so far, technically, the war never ended. So, but because it was no peace treaty to begin with, it was ceasefire. Ceasefire doesn't mean there's an end of war. So, and that, or of course, it resulted in what we are witnessing today, a heavy militarized border known as the DMZ, demilitarized zone. So the Kim dynasty in North Korea established a sort of complete control of the regime. That's what they have. That's just their regime. You call it whatever you want to call it, dictatorship, totalitarianism. You know, those are terminology we use, because when I see where my country is going, you know, we are descending almost into a police state. This is what most Americans have sort of so oblivious to really where things are headed. So for North Korea, yeah, we all know it's a dictatorship. There is nothing new about that one. They hold a firm grip. The Kim family hold a firm grip. Survival of the regime. So this is why they decided to withdraw from the NPT and want to develop the nukes, because they know the US will be threatening them. And if now the US cannot do that, nor any other power, because North Koreans will not hesitate to use their capabilities. I mean, they want even as far. We were trying to prevent North Korea through negotiations from not developing ICBMs because they can reach the United States. They said no. It's because we were never honest in our conversation with them. So they went ahead and developed their own. And that's why now their ICBMs are within reach when you consider their capabilities. So. And this, by the way, of course, with now the isolation of North Korea, which if I am to go back, because I was aware of the developments of, especially in the early 90s, with one particular case when famine became a very serious issue in North Korea. Because I remember at that time, I remember, what's her name? Madeleine Albright, the former secretary. She's another butcher, that one. And she's the one who said, oh, the million children who died in Iraq is just casualty of war. That's how a neocon, another one that, but anyway, it was her that paved the negotiations with the North Korean at that time, with Kim Jong son, the current leader's father. So yeah, Kim Jong-un at that time. But the negotiations led to nowhere. So what you need to understand is that the two Koreans were established in 1948. The Soviet aligned with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, known as DPRK, which was established in the north, and the US aligned with the Republic of Korea, known as the ROK, Republic of Korea in the south, with each claiming legitimacy over the entire peninsula. So still tensions, they're still remembering. This paved the way to the Kim dynasty, where I will share with you a clip about what's going on with the assassination of the half-brother of Kim Jong-un. So Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, established this regime, dictatorship, totalitarian, whatever term you want to use. And this one, he pushed for what's called the implementing the doctrine of Juche. It's Juche, which translates into self-reliance. And that one sort of because of the isolationism or the isolation that North Korea, because we impose sanctions and so forth. As a matter of fact, the survival of North Korea depended on one country and one country only. Do you guys know which country is that? The survival of North Korea has always depended on one country and one country only. Does anybody know which one? If you know, type it in the chat box, please. And I'll share it with the community here. Alice Tarokin, that is correct. It was China. Taiwan still, indeed, China. Matt Backy, China. YT, China. You guys got it. Where is Pierce? Pierce Maker, you said Russia. Yes, they depend on that for the defense aspects of it. But I'm talking about the survival for food and so forth. It was China. So we were having conversation behind closed doors with the Chinese to convince them to stop their support for North Korea. They said, like, you got to be out of your mind for us to do this. Because also China has to worry about if a war breaks out in the Korean Peninsula, China's border will be flooded with refugees. And China doesn't want to see that. No country wants to see that. Look at now what's going on in Poland with Ukrainians. And I was there just only a few months ago. And I have seen some, a year and a half ago when I went there, and I'm seeing Ukrainians walking, because you can tell the difference between a Ukrainian and a Polish, and with all the alcohol, and they got no respect for the law, thinking that they are above the law just because they've been as a guest. And I was like, maybe Poland needs to tighten the belt on these immigrants here, because it's just the same thing that China has always been concerned about. So what's interesting about Kim Jong-il, so because Kim Il-sung was succeeded by his son Kim Jong-il, who continued his father's policies and pursued military first strategy. And that is where North Korea conducted its first nuclear test, which was in 2006. And of course, in 2011, Kim Jong-il was followed by his son, Kim Jong-un, the current leader, who used to study at that time in Switzerland. He was in a private school. Nobody knew who he was. He did have 2 or 3 bodyguards going with him everywhere he went. Nobody knew who a lot of people at that time, based on the reading that I did, that was during my time in Washington. It wasn't classified. It was just official per se. Didn't know at that time. They were thinking those just cousins or whatever, because he never disclosed who he was. So, and he was just leading a life he was play basketball in Switzerland and so forth. He was living a different lifestyle till he was picked up and asked to return to North Korea. So Kim Jong-un, who has presided over a period of heightened international tensions due to the country's nuclear program, but also Kim Jong-un was very, very young at that time. So that is, again, where that difference is. Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support. All right. I had once again, I read another article by Richard Bush. He's a non-resident senior fellow for the Foreign Policy Institute, or Center, that is, for the Center for Asia Policy. Very interesting article. Why I wanted to share this with you, because I want to take you back to 2017. Of course, after the election of Donald Trump, the first term. So, because what did Trump do at that time? He threatened a strong military action. It was specifically on August 8, 2017. I recall this one because I think I was traveling somewhere and I was just shaking my head, because Donald Trump at that time threatened North Korea with so-called, if you remember, fire and fury, in quote, because that's what Trump said, in response to reports that North Korea has developed a sort of nuclear warheads for its missiles. Well, what do you expect? North Korea is not Iran. North Korea is not Iraq. It's not Libya. It's not Qatar. No, because at that time. However, Donald Trump seems to forget certain that North Korea retaliation, that won't be sort of, it's a foregone conclusion if we ever threaten them or launch or conduct an op or whatever. Because the first thing North Korea is going to do is going to wipe out the US presence in South Korea. That's a foregone conclusion. I had a chance to sort of read up on the military action of North Korea in case, as the first on the top of the list, they're going to try to wipe out US soldiers in South Korea, 30,000. And once you start seeing body bags coming here, it's a serious problem. This is exactly, by the way, what Australia gets itself into, by the way. Japan and North Korea and the Philippines is a foregone conclusion. So, and soon to be Taiwan if it doesn't get its act together. So, and I will talk about Taiwan in a minute here. So, and this is what Donald Trump seems to forget back in 2017 or 18, whatever that was, that the idea of threatening North Korea. So there is this belief in Washington, this maximum pressure. So, because the US was soliciting the support of China against North Korea. How dumb those politicians in Washington think they are, that China is going to say, yes, sir, we will help you in whatever you want. So, because they wanted to convince China to pressure North Korea to come to the negotiating table. When the North Korean was saying negotiate for what? So, because they wanted to trade the nuclear program of North Korea for something else. North Korea said, no, we will be happy to negotiate, but nuclear program is out of question. And this is, once again, I find myself going back to this. I'm not beating the dead horse here, guys. It's just I want you to see the reality as is for why Iran is continuing to think in terms, oh, we will negotiate with the Americans. We will negotiate with the IAEA. They have no intentions. The US and the IAEA and Europe, for that matter, they have no intentions to negotiate in good faith. So what's that left Iran with? Which is the same position North Korea was in. And North Korea said, forget about it. That's why they decide to move forward with their own nuclear program. So, and this is why the Americans didn't get it at that time, because they were hoping they will freeze the North Koreans' nuclear program. Now, because what the US administrations ignored the reality that what Kim Jong-un at that time regime, they wanted to achieve one particular capability in addition to what they have, and that the delivery mechanism through the ICBMs, and they did. They did. This is where the support of the Russians come handy. So because we were trying to prevent this, it's too late now. So, and that's why back then I used to argue there is no incentive package you're going to give North Korea that they're going to say, sure, we will turn over our nuclear program. Libya made that mistake. And again, I recall, because I was aware, I was in the middle of some of that. And I was arguing, and again, it was their decision. They trusted the Americans. The moment they turn over, we turned on them. You all know how it ends up for Libya, and look where Libya is right now. So, and that was the what Washington was hoping for, this North Korea to abandon its nuclear program. Yeah, and even when, not if, North Korea has the ability to strike the U.S., that does not mean it will use that capability directly here in the U.S. It has enough targets. That's one of the downside of you as a country having so many bases around the world. In our case, we have bases all over, 756 bases. So Korea doesn't need to hit all the way here in the US. They can target whatever we have in that region, because everything in whatever country the base is, Japan in this case, become a legitimate target. South Korea become a legitimate target. Australia become a legitimate target. Philippines become a legitimate target. So that's usually how they're going to approach it. And that is why sort of the fear we always had is about North Korea's first strike against the US and its allies. It is my belief that North Korea will not hesitate. Once again, this is why we are very careful as to how far we push the North Koreans. So there are those who are saying, those here in Washington saying, no. The North Koreans are exaggerating the threat the US poses. Well, wait a minute. Put yourself in North Korea's position and watch with the activation of military bases like Subic Bay in Philippines. Watch the deal with the Australia about nuclear submarines. Watch the presence of 30,000 plus of soldiers in South Korea. Watch the presence of the expansion of the military base in Okinawa against the will of the Japanese people. How are you going to interpret that? So this is why there's a white paper and analysis coming out of Washington trying to minimize. Of course, we are creating the environment that will push other countries to react nowadays. And the same I say about China. We say to the Chinese, yeah, we like to talk to you, cooperate. Then we turn around and send delegations to Taiwan to agitate the Chinese, sell more weapons. What for? So, and yet we come to the Chinese and say, yeah, we'd like to talk to you about all this. So this is again where that issue of the US, because US we like credibility. We like credibility. The one thing that the North Koreans will not do is they will not ever trust the US, no matter what the US says. So and when the US, given its commitment to the countries like Japan, like South Korea, like Philippines, and now Australia, New Zealand to a degree. New Zealand is one of those countries now behind the scenes, which, by the way, just to let you know, New Zealand have turned down the recognition of the Palestinian state. I mean, just think about it. New Zealand, whoever thought. So, and this is why when you think about North Korea, thinking in terms of, those countries, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Philippines, and so forth, thinking in terms of, we depend on the US, and the US told us we will use all our available means to defend you. Once again, let reality be your guide. If a war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, do you think we're going to go and fight on behalf of South Korea? Do you think we're going to go and fight on behalf of Japan? Use Ukraine as your example right now. Yes, we do send training, we do send this and that. That's normal. I'm talking about troops on the ground. So, and this is where the South Korean and the Japanese security establishments now are sort of wondering after what happened in Qatar. Okay, they're wondering, can we truly depend on the Americans? And this is where the whole issue is about moving forward. So That leads us to the beginning, to the question I asked at the beginning, which is, why is the US wants to meet with North Korea? It's just food for thoughts for you. So I'm going to shift to the conversation, not shift it completely, but I'll talk about this individual. This is Kim Jong-nam. He is the half brother of. Now, there are reports. There've been reports. I was aware of that. There were reports that an unnamed former U.S. official, and usually those officials, not unofficial officials, some of them were in the intelligence community in the U.S. That is, so they disclosed that Kim Jong-nam was a source for the agency, for the CIA. So, of course, the weird thing that I couldn't confirm, and I will not confirm if I don't know, is that to what extent, literally, to what extent his relationship with the agency. I do not know that. So I'm going to share a clip with you, and I want you to, this is a YouTube video, and let me get to the, I'm going to get to the exact timestamp where I have everything, because it's a long one, and I'll provide you the link for this one. You can watch it later on, should you decide to. 27. Okay, let me see here. All right, I'm going to share. This one was from Best Documentary. You know, this was had about 13 million views on it. So I'll provide you the link later on. You can watch it. But this video belongs to them. So I'll give credit where credit is due. So take a listen. We're going to listen to this, and then I'll continue my conversation. So let me share it with you. All right, there we go. In English, this will finish in literally 20 seconds or so.
그 불법에 대한 이제 처벌을 너무 완전 강하게
in the way of the officials in Pyongyang.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there because it's too long. And once again, I'll give credit to the Best Documentary because that's their video. I just want to share that clip with you. So this leads me now to the second part of my analysis of this, and I'll conclude with that. So the idea of for North Korea to announce sort of the as far as its nuclear program, the increase in productivity and so forth, to use all the resources. This is an order that came down from the top, from Kim Jong-un himself, to use all the resources to bolster the nuclear program. It makes you lead to the question as to why. Well, North Korea is not blind to what's going on around the world, basically. And this paved the way to the conversation as far as is North Korea preparing for something, you know, just in case? And most likely the answer is yes. You know, why? Because North Korea is watching how the US is trying to encircle now China. North Korea is a client of China. And it is my belief, should the war, and this is just one of those scenarios, should the war breaks out, North Korea is going to come to the assistance of China, even though China will not need it, but it will come to its aid for it. That is so. And North Korea's, the increase in military readiness and some sort of the nuclear apparatus of this, because it's coming directly from Kim Jong-un. And this is to prepare for a war just in case. So when you think about the US policies in the region, so like I said earlier, now we're going to be reactivating a Subic Bay in Philippines. We are already in Japan. We are already in South Korea, conducting joint military drills and so forth. We are already expanding our presence in Australia now. And now we're trying to get into certain Indo-Pacific islands, you know, like Papua New Guinea and so forth. We're trying to do all this. So for North Korea's calculations, you know, if whomever is advising Kim is going to say, yeah, you can assume that a war will not be over the horizon. The possibility is there. So you'd rather be prepared than be sorry. And this is exactly where North Korea is. If you notice, from last year on, Kim Jong-un has made many orders or issued many orders for the armed forces to prepare for a real war. It's because they are now seeing those developments. What will be the purpose of it? Why would you encircle the entire region for the South China Sea? So what for? If you are calling yourself for peace, why would you need this military hardware? All of it. So, and that's paved the way for the idea of why the North Korea rather, is going into that direction. All this came also against the backdrop of one major event that just took place 2 days ago, which wasn't disclosed here. And I'm going to share a clip with you and do the translation for you, because they have the headlines in Arabic, because it was through Al Jazeera. So let me share. It's very, very, very short, just to highlight to you who is visiting China and why. So once again, this clip belonged to Al Jazeera, and I just wanted to share it with you. Oh, sorry.
So tell us.
Here, what it says right there, it says the foreign minister of North Korea is in Beijing. It says the foreign minister of North Korea, Shui Son-wei, met with he's the chairman of the state council, Li Qiang. That's what it says right there. Yeah, in Beijing. The visit of Shui to China is another step in the right direction in strengthening relations between the two nations following an isolation period for Aisha, meaning North Korea, that is. During the visit, Shui met her counterpart, Mr. Wang Yi, to discuss strengthening the bilateral relations. This meeting came 3 weeks after the summit that had the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, meeting with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, for the first time in more than 6 years. Both leaders, meaning in this case Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un, pledge to strengthen the cooperation between their two countries and support each other. Okay, that's where that clip ends. And once again, I give credit to Al Jazeera, even for the soundtrack, it belongs to them. And this is major. This is major. Again, it wasn't reported here. And that is why, when you consider this movement, because in the world of geopolitics or international relations, it's not enough just to issue statements. Certain types of actions kind of convey or strengthen the message. And this is one of them, when all of a sudden North Korea is dispatching its foreign minister all the way to China. So with all this, you do not ignore the other aspect. And this one has to do with the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Because in June 2024 of last year, North Korea and Russia signed the Mutual Security Treaty. And that one evolving their transactional relationship into a strategic alliance. In other words, North Korea has also reported supplied Russia with weapons for its ongoing war in Ukraine. This is what a treaty is all about. And that treaty, I didn't read it in detail. I have to confirm this for you. But in my opinion, based on what I know, when you sign a treaty like this, is like what the Pakistan just did with Saudi Arabia. This treaty now, it will call for the defense of one country if the other one is attacked. And this is exactly where the difference, where the issue here for North Korea with Russia. So that treaty will lead to that. And this paved the way for us to ask the motivation, beside what I shared with you, for North Koreans. There are those who are arguing that Pyongyang did describing it as aggressive posture. I disagree with this categorization. It's not an aggressive posture, because when you read the analysis emanating from think tanks, be they in Washington, London, Frankfurt, Paris, or whatever else, they don't state the other side of the problem. And the other side of the problem is the US behavior, is NATO expansion into Asia, is NATO calling now China is the threat. They only limit, meaning those think tanks and those analysts only limit the analysis into mentioning that North Korea's aggressive posture is in response to several factors, including ongoing US-South Korea joint military exercises. Well, yeah, that will be one of them. But what about doing other things, like, for example, reactivating an entire military base in Philippines? What will be that for? And their argument that, North Korea is after being recognized as a world legitimate nuclear power. They don't care for that. They care less for that. What they care about, the regime's survival. So suffice it to know that if they have a working nuclear weapon, that you're going to think twice about attacking them. That's it. To me, those analyses, when they come out stating this kind of stuff, that's just a distraction. Those are what I call fillers. This is how you feel. It's fillers, no more, no less. You talk about something of substance. You mentioned the issue as to why. Because North Korea is seeing, for example, the US involvement in Taiwan. And that's, in my opinion, because it could incentivize. Yeah, it will incentivize North Korea to support China in that endeavor, if China ever needed. Why? Because you have Japan that is already claiming we will come to the support of Taiwan. Well, if you only know the history of some of the Japanese who fled into Taiwan. And second, why will the heck Japan will go all the way to defend Taiwan for? Taiwan is part of China. So why will Japan will ever consider that one? Then there is the big elephant in the room. And the big elephant of the room has to do with the US actions vis-a-vis China. Remember, North Korea depends on China. And when you consider North Korea is also watching the trade tariffs and the tensions between the US and China. Of course, sanctions still apply on North Korea, but they're working around that somehow. But the US and China sort of continue in their economic tit for tat, and rightly so. But China holds the upper hand regarding this. And now you have the second term of the Trump administration wanting to impose more tariffs on the Chinese goods. Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that. So because the idea of, for the Chinese perspective, looking at the US strengthening these alliances now in the Indo-Pacific, which include, of course, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia to a degree, this one has one objective and one objective only, even though, in my opinion, it will fail. And that objective is the strategic effort to contain or encircle China. I've argued this since 2007. I remember brought the conversation in Washington at that time with some colleagues in the office and all that. And I sort of, mentioned that, if you are thinking about containment, it's not going to work. Once again, use history as your guide. China is not the former Soviet Union. The conditions of the geopolitical landscape today differ from those of the 70s and 80s back then. And China economically is in a different position from what the Soviet Union was during its height. That's why it's not going to work. However, China is not taking a chance because they're saying this, including this uptick of the movements in the Korean Peninsula. Because that one, it will reinforce the perception of the Chinese that, oh, all the Americans is doing here, trying to encircle us for that. So North Korea is saying, we're not gonna take chance with this. So you look at also the idea of the island chain strategy. So, and the island chain strategy, which is a Cold War era concept that was sort of hatched by the U.S. at that time to contain so-called communist influence. The strategy of encirclement, policy of strategic encirclement, which is not going to work. It might work with some other state, but not against China. Once again, because where China is economically, militarily, and technologically, the U.S. will stand no chance. And I say this based on facts. Of course, when you look at the U.S. policy shift, a report that was issued for 2025, which indicated the possibility of a U.S. shift to prioritize now the domestic and Western Hemisphere issues over containing China. So, of course, some in Washington ridiculed this particular notion. On the other hand, I see the logic of it because maybe someone in Washington is realizing this containment policy is a failure from the get-go. So why bother? How about if we focus on the Western Hemisphere? And this is why I'm going to do the topic for you regarding Latin America, one particular country. I'm not going to get ahead of it, but that is the reason why. I do things for a reason, guys. Just wants you to know. So then my last thing here has to do with the intertwined the regional powers. What do I mean by that? This is where you see North Korea's action, also shaped by some domestic need. And of course, the rising tensions. The domestic need is the survival of the regime, but the rising tensions between the two superpowers, United States and China, because that one, it contributes to some sort of a volatile regional security environment in the Korean Peninsula. And North Korea is not willing to take any chance whatsoever. So I do not see some assessments saying, some analyses that's been regarding this topic saying, oh, all North Korean wants to do is take advantage of this friction to its advantage. For what? North Korea understands that it is under sanctions, global sanctions, that is, except with China. It developed its nuclear capabilities. So why will they care? So that just, I don't see this argument. And usually when you read something like this, that's meant for domestic consumption, no more, no less. That's the way I see it. So even when you think about their representative at the UN, and I have his picture. His name is Kim Jong-un. That's his picture here. This is the representative of North Korea in the UN. Here is what he said, and I quote here: "We will never give up our nuclear arsenal." End of quote. Straightforward. So he's not gonna budge on this one here, because North Korea. This is North Korea's vice foreign minister, Kim Jong-un, stressed that yesterday that his country will never give up its nuclear arsenal, considering its denuclearization a threat to its sovereignty and existence. And rightly so. That's how they see it. This is once again leads me back to Iran. Iran should kind of see the patterns and learn from those patterns. So, what I found interesting, and I read the statements of the representative or the North Korea's vice foreign minister. What I found very interesting about it is that he left the door ajar, slightly open, just in case. Made it clear they will never, ever abandon nuclear program. But he left the door ajar for diplomacy, just in case. Because he mentioned that his country, North Korea, that is willing to cooperate, but not with the US. willing to cooperate with countries that reject aggression and hegemony and seek independence and justice. End of quote. That's his statement. And that tells you the story right there. So this is so when you take this statement by North Korea and compare it to what South Korean leader said, and I'm going to share a picture of the South Korean right here. This is President Lee Jae. I can't pronounce the last name, so I'm not going to butcher it. So when you compare his statements, here is what he said. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, when he delivered the speech, and once again I read his statements, because that's how you learn about where policies are headed. You know, here is what he said. He said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, South Korea is expressing, he said that the United States has expressed its commitment to ending the vicious cycle of tensions between the two Koreas, and emphasized that his country, meaning South Korea that is, does not seek regime change in North Korea. I'll let you decide on that. I'll let you decide on that. Anyway, that's all I have to share with you. This is the end of my live stream here. I went over, usually I do 1 hour for you for this one here. But again, it's a very interesting topic because I want you to know exactly what is going on with all this. As I mentioned, I will be working on two other stories for you, one from Latin America and one from West Asia, and we'll decide. I will do both, it's just which one goes first. I haven't decided yet. I'm waiting on a confirmation of certain information. So please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you have not done so. And I will greatly appreciate you if you could support the channel should you decide to do so. Here is the link for the channel, and I'm very, very grateful to you. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, bye-bye.